40,000 years ago, two people stepped into the frozen wind of Ice Age Europe. They were wrapped in animal skins, stitched by bone needles and tied with twisted reeds. No fabric survives, no tunics or shoes remain, but we know that they were dressed. And despite the limited evidence, archaeologists have been extremely adaptive in working out what kinds of clothes we wore and when. From using art to analysing lice, this is how we know we were wearing clothes at the very onset of human expansion. This is the story of how we know we were dressed in the past. This is one of the many Venus figurines. It was made about 20,000 years ago in Ice Age Europe, when the world was far colder than today. By this time, humans had populated most of the world with a few exceptions, and this figurine is unique. It may display the first known representation of clothing. Now, there are many artifacts with this type of depiction. The first physical evidence doesn't appear until about 6000 BC in Turkey, where archaeologists find early woven fibre. And this point is just the pinnacle of evidence for textiles, and after this it becomes much more common in the archaeological record. At Fayum in Egypt, a fragment of linen and fabric dating to about 5000 BC was found in a small pot. In Denmark, Bronze Age bog bodies offer remarkable insights into prehistoric textiles. But why don't we find anything earlier? It is incredibly hard to find certain materials after certain dates, because everything is subjected to a rate of decay. Unlike stone or clay, organic materials like cloth are fragile and they rarely survive. When they do, it's because they were preserved in environments that slow or prevent their decay. Places that are cold, dark, wet, or very dry, like bogs, deserts, or glaciers. In fact, much of what we know about early organic materials come from these rare preservation environments. Take Ötzi the Iceman, for example. Thanks to his remarkable glacial conditions, his clothing was preserved in remarkable detail, offering a snapshot of prehistoric fashion and survival. And still, while this evidence is fantastic to find in the archaeological record, there are still clever ways to trace his clothing back even when fabric doesn't remain. In several regions, it's quite common to find early depictions of humans that show more than just body form, they show dress. In southern Africa, San rock paintings portray figures wearing skin cloaks, aprons and belts. These aren't just stylized, but intentional representations of clothing. In Europe, engravings from sites in France, dated to 25,000 years ago, show similar adornments interpreted as sashes or loincloths. Even tools tell a story. At a 39,600-year-old site in Spain, archaeologists have found a bone fragment covered in tiny deliberate holes. Microscopic analysis and experimental archaeology have confirmed that the marks were made with a burin, a tool used to pierce leather. One set of aligned holes shows repeated precise strikes, the earliest known leather punchboard used to make tailored garments thousands of years before the invention of eyed needles in Europe. It is quite a remarkable thing to see. And I believe this challenges quite traditional assumptions about early hominin. These early humans weren't just draping hides, they were shaping fitted clothing for function, for movement and even expression. And it also opens a door to an intriguing possibility. Could Neanderthals have done the same? This technique doesn't require needles, just awls or sharp stone points, tools Neanderthals are documented to have had. And while there is no direct evidence, the technological threshold for tailored clothing may have been well within their reach. In colder climates, tailored garments could have made the difference between survival and extinction. Perhaps even our distant cousins were dressing with more intention than what we've assumed. But we can push this story even further. In 2011, an interesting study came out that took an unexpected route involving lice. They compared the DNA of two types of lice: clothing lice, which only live in clothing, and head lice. And from this, they were able to estimate that clothing lice diverged from head lice around 83,000 to 170,000 years ago. And this transforms the belief about early hominin wearing clothes. This means that humans in Africa were likely wearing clothes long before they migrated to colder climates, and that clothing wasn't just a cold weather invention, it may have been part of a broader shift toward modern human behaviour. And what astounds me at least is this ability to work with limited evidence to piece together a picture from fragments, insects and images shows just how adaptable archaeology has become. Without it, we might assume that there were no clothes, people must have been naked, but thanks to these creative methods, archaeologists have bridged a gap of tens of thousands of years. But still, no method is perfect. Dating rock art is notoriously difficult and relies heavily on subjective interpretation. What one researcher sees as a loincloth, another may view as a body mark or a ritual symbol. This is heavily problematic in instances where distinguishing adornment from clothing has to happen, and in most instances, these distinguishments have to be done without support from archaeological context. And going back to our 2011 paper, the presence of clothing lice doesn't necessarily indicate the invention of complex garment. It only suggests that humans were regularly wearing some form of body covering long enough to create a stable habitat for these parasites. However, if we just stop and take a look at the big picture, the search for the origins of clothing reveals something much deeper, not just about what we wore, but how archaeology adapts when the past leaves little behind. From lice genetics to stone engravings and leatherworking tools, archaeologists have built a toolkit that stretches far beyond what's visible. Each discovery, whether a parasite's DNA or a punctured bone, pushes the story of clothing back further, reminding us that absence doesn't always mean nothing was there. In the end, this isn't about clothing. It's about the innovations we can't see and the science that helps us imagine them. And it leaves us with one lingering question. Is the absence of evidence really evidence of absence?